of the visual arts. So there's a range of styles and materials, both two-dimensional and three-dimensional works, works that are site-specific, works that move, works that light up, and all of these artists use in some way mathematical or scientific principles in sometimes very obvious and explicit ways and sometimes more implicit ways. So a big range of the way the artists use this different technology. And when I say technology, we're talking about technology in a very broad term. We specifically had a lot of conversations about the title for this exhibition because we didn't, initially somebody had suggested in the computer age. And I didn't want to say computer age because then I thought people would assume it was all computer generated artwork. So this is, the information age is kind of loosely around the 1970s when the industrial evolution kind of changed from making and manufacturing products to more service-based industries that provide information and how that information gets used. And it kind of aligns a lot with development of the computer technology. So there's a lot of, that's kind of the idea of where this comes from. And a lot of the works in this exhibition are difficult to categorize. They're not necessarily just painting or just sculpture. There's a lot of overlap and meshing of different types of ideas. And you'll see similarities between some of the works. And you'll see some that look, there's a lot of differences too. So like with most art, I mean, there's very much an individual artistic intention for each artist, so that it doesn't, it's not going to, there are similarities, but there's also big differences. And a lot of the work deals with perception and how you see things. There's some commonalities in that. A number of the pieces deal with movement and how we perceive movement, whether it's implied movement or actual movement. Some of the works are interactive, where the audience participant has to get involved in the work. So there's a range of different kinds of ideas and how they're explored. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first. Oops. Oh, come on. There. Okay, so this is one of the first works when you come in the gallery, and this is by Gilbert Chou. He is a painter, and he deals a lot with the illusion of motion, and the way he's the design and the patterning on the panel leads you to think that this is spinning. And I have to say, when I went to his studio to see his work and saw an entire studio of all of these works, it was very overwhelming. And there's almost like a dizzying and almost a rhythmic beat that you could feel in the studio with all of these works. So this is on a flat wood panel, and this particular piece does have a cutout in the center. You can see right in here there's a little shadow. That's from the shadow from the lighting. So this is a circular piece. This is just so you know that's the way the photograph is, but it is a circular piece. He does start his work with the outside shape of his canvas. That's how, but then he thinks about how he wants to where the, I don't know what the word is. Where the point, but in this case it's a center point, but sometimes it's like on the lower part of the canvas or of the panel, or to one side, and then how he arrays all of the sequential lines around it. And he does use tape to help him get this patterning so even and exact. One of the things you can't really tell in this slide is how that silvery gray color is actually very metallic, and it shines and sparkles. So you kind of lose that in the slide. That digital slides are great, but they tend to flatten things out a bit.
And this does have the panel does have a bit of depth. It's about an inch or so deep, inch and a half deep. So but it is a flat panel. It's not curved or carved or anything. And a lot of people, when they see this in person, think that it's actually, the panel is actually, you know, curved in here. But that's the illusion of the way he's painted the sequentially spaced lines with the alternating colors have allowed that to happen. This is another work by Gilbert also. This one is a triangular shaped panel, similar thing. And this is what I mean by where he places his point to start, whereas the point that all the lines radiate is the tip of the triangle. And they go up and they widen as they go up. So it creates this different feeling about that, and emphasizes that triangular shape of the panel. And this one also he chooses to use more color. And you know, it's very hard when you're going to an artist studio to choose two works when you're seeing about, you know, 30 or 40 works, and to try to think about which ones would be a good representation of the artist's work and fit in with the themes of the show. So I did intentionally choose one that was more black and white and monochromatic, and one that had colors. That was a pretty conscious choice on my part to do that. So I'm going to go on. So this is an installation view of 3 works by Daniel Hill. I'll have some close-up views in a moment of each one. But just in general, Daniel has worked in a lot of different media, in digital media, painting, photography, and sculpture. These works are, he calls them wire drawings, and they were an exploration when he thought about the effects of gravity on his painting, about how gravity would actually, if the painting was real and the gravity was pulling on it, how would it affect the painting? And he started making these wire drawings, line drawings with wire, and these very much depend upon the points of how they're installed as to what the form is that you see. I can explain when I do a close-up. I'll explain a little bit more. So he creates these, all of these wire things very much. They're all handmade, all pieced together in his studio. So each connection is made by hand. So it's very meticulous the way he puts it together. And surprisingly, when we were installing the show, they went up very easily. And we thought we were going to have some issues with it, but they went up very easily. And some of this one is called Net. And if you can see, oops, sorry, that didn't do that. It's hung by 2 points, one up here and one over here. So that if you changed the position of these 2 points and connections where it hits the wall, you would change the way this whole shape is. And yes, he did specify to us exactly where those points should be. So that's something that the artist decided, we didn't decide. But if you moved this point, this point over to here, this whole thing would be, you know, compressed and narrower. So it's a way to think about. So there's more of an investigation about, you know, kind of gravity, about how gravity plays on a structure. And these are really squares. So that if you held this out straight, you know, from point to point, they are squares. But as they get the shape changes depending on where those points are. Okay. So this is called Sling, and this one it has 2 points, one up here and one over here. So this one very specifically, the points have to be exactly level. So if these 2 points aren't level with each other, then that whole
curve that you get the way the sling goes down, this whole this curved line that comes here, it wouldn't hang straight, because if those points aren't level, then the gravity is pulling on it equally, and it creates that nice even arc. Whereas if they weren't level, then you would get a different. It would look very different.
Karen, before you
yes.
move on, there was a question about maybe any specific experiences that caused him to think about gravity that came up in the chat.
I don't think it was a particular experience. I know he talked about it and thinking about his paintings, which were a lot of which were they were abstract panels. He had showed me a few that had very, very kind of grid designs on them, and he was thinking about, that's a two-dimensional surface, so gravity doesn't change that. But what if that was three-dimensional? How would gravity change that design? So that's I can answer. Let's see. Okay, and so this one is called Diagonal Slice, and this one there are 2 points at the top over this one. You're seeing it a little bit of an angle here, so here and here, it's hard to say. If you kind of look the way the shadow falls on the wall, that's the end of the point. It sticks out a few inches from the wall, so there is space. It actually goes into the space, so out from the wall and into the space. And because these wires he used a couple different types of wire. These are stiffer, so there's not as much bend in some of these. So it creates these angles get created just because of where you're putting those points in, and it kind of almost it kind of folds a little bit because of where those points are and the way it's constructed. I hope that's clear. It's hard to describe things when they're not in front of you. Much easier to do it in the gallery when it's right there. Okay. So then this is the next area of the gallery, and we had 2 works that were site-specific works. This is the first one by Lynn Harlow, and this is this is one of the works that really depends upon viewer interaction. And this, you can see our collections manager, Kristen, going through. She was our model for our photo. We wanted to let people know that you were supposed to walk through, because usually we tell people not to touch and not to do things on the gallery. But in this case, the intention was that you would walk into the space. Let's see, what can I lost my train. This is by Lynn Harlow. She's does a lot of different types of work, a lot of installation work and a lot of sculptural work, paintings and drawing. She uses a lot of different materials. She's done some paintings using plexiglass and different types of things, and plexiglass that's colored plexiglass that has some interesting effects. And she's interested a lot in the effects of light, and how when a color is in different materials, even though it's the same color, it can appear differently. Those were a couple of things that she's investigated with her work. This particular piece, I had seen when I went to visit her in her studio, I had seen like a prototype, I guess you would say, of a similar image and a similar work. So we had talked about the possibility of creating something just for us for this exhibition. So that's what we ended up doing. So, and then I'm going to show you this, and it's a little video. And I'm just going to not talk for a minute. If you could just look carefully. So what we found after we installed it, we didn't really know fully that this was going to happen because of the air currents in the gallery. There happens to be a vent way up here on the wall over here. It very gently and subtly moves this vinyl curtain with the air current flowing. And then we found that it also, as it did that, it also, because there is some metallic threads and things, the light coming off of this vinyl curtain starts reflecting on the floor. So if I go back to the video for a sec, you see on the floor, that's just the light in the gallery reflecting off of the moving curtain. So it became a really beautiful effect that we both really loved. After she set it up, we were like, this is real, you know, we were both very happy with how it came out because it really added another element. And this is sometimes what happens when it's a site-specific work. You can plan it to a certain extent, but then what happens when it's in the actual space can be a little bit different. Go on to the next one. And then we have two paintings by Irene Rousseau, and her work is very much based on, has an underlying structure in the similar way that Gilbert Chou has an underlying structure to it. So there's almost like a, not really a, kind of a, in hers it's more of a grid. And I should have, if you look, if you can look at some of these, can't really zoom in, but there are, you can see some faint lines and pencil lines as she kind of makes a grid on the canvas. And then she works with a lot of symmetries that are found in nature and mathematics, branching and spirals and waves and tessellations. And she really combines a lot. She's actually studied math. There's a PhD in mathematics, so it's a kind of very much a combination of mathematics studies and her painting. And she plans these out very much in advance and basically does these repetitions of pattern on pattern on pattern on pattern on pattern and all these different symmetries. By that I mean, if you know there's a symmetry in all these different lines. There's horizontal symmetries, vertical symmetries, diagonal symmetries. So there's a lot going on in each painting, and this is the other one in the show. So you can see the difference. And then she, although these look like these are, kind of different shapes, they're all based on these little squares. And you can, it's hard to see in the overall image, but if you looked at it in person, you would see that these shapes are made up of little squares. All right. So these are a couple works by James Clarke. He uses a whole range of ideas and materials. Mostly he's exploring light, and he uses a lot of neon and fluorescent and LED, and a combination with vinyl and other materials. So this is more of an installation shot. And then this is one of the works that we have. You can see. So let's see. And he's another person that when you go in his studio, it's like a real tinker's workshop, and everything lights up and moves and does lots of different things. And these are a combination of, it looks like there's a lot of your perception of what this is made out of really changes when it's lit up. This is actually a mirrored plexiglass. They're very light as far as lightweight. And when you plug it in, this starts to look like aluminum or another metal. And so it really plays on what the actual materials are and what they can appear to be. And this one also, the lights. then this one, this was one of the ones that intrigued me in his studio. It is actually held, it is a vertical broken line, and it's illuminated wire, so it lights up. But these are actually magnets, so that they have to be exactly the right distance apart in order to hold that tension, so that that bottom one stays vertical, but it doesn't touch the top one. And he came and installed this in the gallery, and it was a little bit of adjusting. He actually recreated this for us because the one in the studio wasn't tall enough for our space. So he came in and put it up and actually remade it a little bit so that it would work in our space better. So let's see. So I'm gonna go. Oops. So this is the view of the other side of the gallery, and you can see back here, that's the piece with the magnets. You can see right here, that's the detail that I showed you where they're not touching. But it goes all the way up to the ceiling. So I'm going to go next to these two pieces on the back, which are by John Goodyear and were lent to us from Barry Campbell Gallery. They, just before I show you them more closely, they are actually each made up of two pieces. There's a painting on the wall, and in front of it, suspended, you can kind of see the little hardware way up here. There's a grid that's suspended in front of it. That's the white vertical lines. So I'm going to go to the next one here. And again, I'm just going to play the little video for you. So that's one, and I'm gonna do the next one just so you can. Whoops. And this is the other one. So these works are another work where there's an interaction with the audience, because these two I can't really call them paintings, but they don't, until you basically tap the edge of the screen and let it slide back and forth in front of the painted canvas, you're not really seeing the work, because the work is really in motion. So that was one of the things that was very important to him. And John Goodyear did a lot of work that kind of pushed the boundaries of what's painting, what's sculpture, how it, is it completely abstract? Is there some figurative quality to it? Somebody had previously asked me about this painting, about what the canvas looks like on the back, and as you can imagine, the canvas, when the screen isn't in front of it, it's basically rows of little squares, because what happens is the grid on front covers the different rows, so you get the idea of somebody jumping off the diving board. And then this is what I mean by technology. This is a very simple technology, but it's also about how you see things, and how, it's a very simple idea, but just very elegantly done. Okay, so this is the other corner of the gallery. These are works by Jim Seawright, and this is by Patricia Zarate, who is actually with us today. So I'm going to show you some. These are also ones that move and light up. So I'm going to show you those videos. Jim Seawright was one of the earliest artists to actually incorporate electronics and technology into his sculpture. So this one is called Twins. And this one, it has movement on its own, but it also responds. There are light sensors on the ends of on the ends here and here, and if you cover them over, then it moves in a different way. I was only in the gallery by myself when I took this after we went remote, and I was by myself. So I tried to get to cover part of where the light was coming from so that it would move. I'm gonna just run it again because I think it's. I'm trying to block the light on this, on the left-hand edge there, so it moves. And so this is Lyra, and he did a series that are based on constellations. And these next two are from the same constellation series. This is Lyra and then Gemini. And you can see, and let's go to the next one. Oops. There we go. So this one is Gemini. And you'll see the lights. There are different little lights that come on and off. Now this doesn't interact, you're not interacting with these, the constellation pieces. He's planned out the movement. Those are not, you're not affecting the movement on those two. And then this is Patricia's piece, which we had Patricia, I'm going to let you talk about your own work, but I just want to say that when I went to her studio visit, there were lots of things I wanted. And Patricia has some wonderful pieces that fit in the corners with reflected light. They were really nice. But as I thought about it, I didn't think they would work well in our space because our gallery, the scale of our gallery was just too large. And I thought they would get lost in space. But we had also talked about these tri-modulation series that she worked on. So again, when we were talking, we thought about, well, let's make something specific for us. So Patricia made this for us for this exhibition. She's done similar works, and then she came in and installed it. And I think the thing that you don't see in this, particularly in this photograph, is that there is a little bit of depth to the triangles because they're made of a heavier paper cardstock, and you get a very slight kind of shadow almost around the edge of them. So there is a little bit of dimension when you see it in reality. It's not as flat as it looks in these photographs. So Patricia, if you want to.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that is joining us today. This piece was originally conceived for another show, and it was predominantly black and white. So I initially had black and gradations of gray. And thinking about this show and what to do, and also the space, the wall space as a whole, I was considering, you know, either to do one new piece or do a variation of the piece I had shown before. So I decided to do a variation, and this is pretty much just a mirror image of the piece between the two. And one of the things I added was color, yellow. And it's pretty much a 4-color piece because of the white wall, so that's included. And the total dimensions of this is 40 by 87 inches. Everything is hand cut, so there are imperfections with all the triangles. And hanging is, you know, that's the tricky part, and the idea of keeping the straight angle. And if you stare at the piece for a while, you start seeing it even in this flat 2-dimensional screen, which is what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing it go in and out in focus. And you also have what they call an after image. Once you close your eyes and you can see it vibrating. So again, with everything in the rest of the show, there is an element of movement and perception and how you see these triangles creating diamond shapes and widening and coming in. And I would also say that with many of the pieces, you have to give it time to sort of, you know, spend some time to see everything that's happening in front of you. And so that whole idea of perception and how we see things comes into play.
Yeah, taking time with each piece is something that we always encourage people to do, especially if you look at it at first and you don't get it. I would say, well, you know, take 15 minutes and really look at it and look about what are you seeing and what, you know, what could it mean? You know, because sometimes I think, especially with abstract art, it's harder for a lot of people because they want it to be something, and it often isn't a thing. So I think that's one thing we always try to encourage, especially when we do a lot with grade schools and university classes, of course. And one of the things we always say is to stop and look, and just, you know, give it literally 2 minutes to look at something, and that's a long time when you're looking at something, and that seems to help them all. So I'm happy to answer any questions, discuss anything more. I don't know, Sasha, if anybody had posted any questions. If somebody wants to unmute themselves and just ask a question, that's okay. I don't think we're too big of a group to do that. So.
We did get one comment in the chat about how squinting at particularly this work of art kind of changes the way you see things too. So just a comment that someone had added.
Yeah. Well, I think as Patricia was saying, when you, especially her work, I mean, you start looking at it and it does start to kind of like play with your eyes a little bit. And you really do, you know, get a sense of movement. Not the same way you get movement in some of the other ones. So it's a little bit different, but it's that but there is that repeated pattern, you know, kind of starts to do that, I think, you know, kind of give you that sense. So I think one of the things that when I was deciding about artists for the exhibition was I was trying to get artists who did have different ways of seeing how to, you know, and interpreting how to use technology or math or science in their work. And as I said, I think everybody does it slightly differently. And I think the works are very different also. You know, whether they're more graphic, you know, the sculptural works that move, it's slightly different. There's a lot of, you know, variation within what, you know, how people would use it. So, well, if nobody has any more questions, I don't know if.
Oh, there is one, there is a couple of questions.
Yeah, they just popped
Oh.
on my screen too. Thank you for pointing that out. I guess this is we have one for Patricia. Describe her process in executing the art, maybe explaining a little bit about the cut paper process and the application.
So I think I can go back to like when I first started using the triangle, and and using colored paper, and that was early 2000s. I felt like using the color paper at that time would help me kind of get reintroduced to color, because before that I was just working in black and white. So the other thing I wanted to do with colored paper is look at the color relationships. And so I did a body of work purely on that idea of placing one color and another, and how that plays, and flipping it, or introducing other colors, and how that relationships work. For these particular pieces, I was interested in using modular units to be able to create larger works. Since my studio is in my home now, it's difficult to think of making permanent pieces. The beauty about this is that this is all in one little box, and I can make it as big as I want, and just means more cut pieces. And I like the idea of taking a two-dimensional surface and trying to play with how we see and create a dimension in there, just with the movement. And that's kind of how I got started with this type of work. And this is now the 4th installation I've made using colored triangles. And the last piece I made actually is a circle. It was a 6-foot circle using triangles and using just 3 colors.
Great. Just looking to see.
Yeah, I think that kind of covered a little bit of the question about the illusion of modeling. You kind of touched upon that with the 3 dimensions, but that's the last question, referencing like your black and gray triangles.
I'm not sure that I even knew that I was going to get this kind of effect when I started doing these. So it was a nice surprise. When I first start making these pieces, I don't really have a pattern or anything. I just start right on the wall in my home studio. And so that was very arbitrary, and I just started playing with pattern. And so that modeling part just came in there, and it was that illusion came in there too. And it's something that I'm playing off now, that I can see that is the effect.
Yeah. No, I mean, people always ask me, like, do I have a favorite work in the show? And I always feel like it's the one I'm looking at the moment. No, and because we worked on this and you came in and spent a couple of days with us while you were installing it, you and Deborah, so I feel like we're more closer to it, I guess. But does anybody else have any other additional questions or comments? Putting up an exhibition is very much a team effort, and we had 3 different artists that came in and installed their work, and then I'm just going to go go back to the Goodyear for a moment. We had, I'm just going to go follow that back. One more, there we go. We had a lot of fun putting these two pieces up. We did not expect them. Kristen Rudy and I, who's the Associate Curator and Collections Manager at the museum, we didn't expect that they would be a huge problem, but it became the hardest problem because there's a lot of the screens in front are held up by fishing line monofilament, and there's a lot of play with that. They're not, it's hard to get it exactly right. We finally did, but it was a bit of a challenge, and that wasn't what we were expecting was going to be the hard thing to put up. So it was kind of an interesting kind of. But Patricia, I want to thank you very much for joining us and adding your comments. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry that this exhibit got cut a little bit short because of the coronavirus. But just so everybody knows, I'm going to go to the last slide here for a moment. We have put, oops, oh crap. We have put on our website, on the exhibition page for the Uncharted, there is a PDF copy, an interactive PDF copy of the catalog with my essay along with two others. There are the little short videos that you see here are posted on our website, a couple installation images, and then individual images of each work. So you can get a good idea about the show from that page. We added a whole bunch of content so that people could get it virtually. So I think that will help. And hopefully we hope to be open in the fall. We don't have a date yet, but that is our plan. Because Hofstra is going to do in-person classes in the fall, so we're assuming that we're going to be open also. Not sure yet exactly when that will be, but if you're interested on our website, we always update our information on our calendar. We also, if you want to get on our mailing list on our newsletter, you can do that on the website too. And we send out about monthly a constant contact with our update about what's happening. And I see there's some new, okay. It is one of those exhibits that really, shines in person, and it's a little lacking virtually, I think. But then I'm an object person, so I like to see things. So. But thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, you can certainly contact us at the museum. Our website has all of our contact information. And actually the email for this Zoom has my email on there too. So, all right, so thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you set the recording? I forgot.
did. I did.
Thank you.
Because I saw, we'll just have to edit the first little bit. We'll just kind of
Yeah.
set you up. I didn't want to message you and distract you, so I just hit here. I'm going to turn the recording off actually now.
Yes.
Let me stop that.